All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Friday free for all. That means, of course, like all the other days, you can call in at any time. It's free for anybody to call in. Of course, we don't charge nothing. There's no charges or no commercials or nothing. Although I wouldn't mind having some of those YouTube ads pushed into my program. That would be a function of the total number of subscribers. I believe we need to get to 500, and that would put just a few shekels in my pocket, which I would be happy to take. Of course, that would mean when you watch, you'd have to watch a few ads. And I know how frustrating, how annoying that is when I'm trying to watch some YouTube video and I have to see some ad for, I don't know, performance enhancements or whatever the heck. I can't even remember what all those ads are. Eating blueberries. I don't know, whatever they are. They're very, very irritating. But nevertheless, it would be nice for me to get just paid a little bit of gratification, I guess, a little bit of sense that this program is making a difference, right? It's that worth getting something from Google for doing it, from Alphabet that owns YouTube. If you want to join me, though, love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. Don't forget, click like, and I mentioned the subscribe. Yeah, the subscriptions really, really help. So that would be awesome if you get a chance. Let me see if I can find my subscribe now. There we go. Yeah, so please do go ahead, subscribe now. And don't forget what I think is a great resource. And by the way, see, Ari is in the chat already. I think the Facebook group Halitics is a really good resource. You get a lot of comments there. Kind of get a sense of where you are, what you're thinking when I am checking out posts there. And of course, I post as well, getting feedback. So I think that's a good option because, I mean, after all, the goal is to have that conversation, a dialogue. That's what we do that other programs just don't, is have a dialogue about the issues of the day. And there's no third rails. There's nothing I won't talk about. There's no issue that I don't think is worthy of attention. And today, in fact, the more controversial something is, the more likely I'm going to take it on. Antisemitism. So this is something that I think a lot of people just sort of assume is part of the landscape, that people don't like Jews, that there's attacks on Jews, there's negative commentary about Jews. And there may be truth to that. I'm not denying it. I can't get into people's hearts and minds. I'm sure there are people who don't think much of me or my co-religionists. I guess I've even seen some comments online. I mean, I had one Facebook friend, in quotes, who, I think he really did think people who were Jewish, there was something different about us. And maybe there is something different. I don't really, but my take has always been, hey, you can think what you want, you can feel what you want, but everyone has enough and no one has too much. That's the bottom line. Whatever you think of somebody, they deserve health care. Whatever you think of somebody, they deserve meaningful remunerative labor that is consistent with their skill set and their interests. Whatever you think of somebody, they should have vacation time culture. That's my view. And, no one should be subject to attacks because for any reason, but certainly not because of their religion or their ethnicity. According to the Anti-Defamation League, which has been pretty much discredited, as a matter of fact, there's been a surge of attacks on Jewish people because of their religion since, October 7 to almost 2 years ago now, or well over 1 year ago. In Florida, just a few days ago, 2 Israelis were shot. They were not killed. They were shot, though. And that attack is being investigated as a hate crime. So you might say, well, look, Hal, what are you talking about? These 2 Israelis were shot. So obviously, it's a hate crime. They were shot because they're Jewish. Israelis are Jews. They were shot. But the second you look into it, you realize that the killer was I believe, an Orthodox Jew, certainly somebody who's very religious and Jewish. And they were shot not because they're Israeli, but because the shooter thought they were Palestinian. So at least with regard to this hate crime, the hater, not the hated, the hater is a Jew. And the victims were targeted because they were thought to be Palestinian. So I think this is very, very instructive as to where we are in America today. Most Jewish people, very few of us, and I've asked people, well, you say you're a victim. When does this happen? When have you been targeted? When has someone said, oh, I hate you because you're Jewish? There's a word, like the N word for Jews, the K word. I might have heard that once or twice when I was a kid. I don't really remember, but it may have happened. I wouldn't be shocked if it did. And certainly when I was, I remember an incident where someone made a remark when I was in my early 20s, and I was really shocked. I was taken aback. I couldn't believe somebody would say something that was so overtly anti-Semitic. So yeah, it does happen. But I don't view myself as a member of a victimized group of people by any means. I think our obligation is not to count every single incident and try to figure out and jerry-rig it and gerrymander it into some kind of a evidence of hate and victimization of my particular group. It's just try to make my group caring, responsive to others, demanding of justice for all. And I think claiming the status of victimhood gets right in the way. But all that said, hey, if we're victims, and we should acknowledge it. I mean, the truth is the truth. That's really important. I posted that story on my Facebook page, about how the shooting in Florida was not evidence in any way of anti-Semitism, but just the opposite. And I got this response from somebody I didn't even really realize was a Facebook friend, but a friend from high school, somebody that I knew quite well in high school and hadn't really had contact with. And we were pretty close, actually. So this was their response. Yes, Hal, anti-Semitism is way overblown. And the fact that you post this on the day that the bodies of the BUS mother and the babies and Oded Leifshitz and Israeli peace activists who drove Gazans for medical treatment in Israel are returned in a display so sickening that even the Red Cross and the UN condemned it as truly despicable. So I'm being attacked as despicable now. I'll be honest with you, I really hadn't thought about the remains of the 3 family members, or they were thought to be 3 family members. Now it appears that the mom may not have been. These were 4 people who were being held as hostages, and 3 were supposedly a mom and her 2 children, including, I think, a baby, an infant, and then an older man, a much older man, an octogenarian. And so I'm being attacked. Well, how dare you point out that the shooting, the attack on 2 Israelis was actually perpetrated by a Jew who wanted to kill Palestinians? How dare you point that out, Hal, on a day when Israel is in mourning because of these hostages? And what's so ironic about that, I mean, there's so many ironies. But again, I go back to where I started, which is stop whining about how you're a victim. If you need something, if you need health care, if you need education, then you should get it and you should demand it. But just to point to something that happened in Florida, or even frankly in Israel, when you don't understand all the facts, when the evidence doesn't support your contention, I say don't do it. I say think 3 times, especially before you insist that you have somehow been attacked, that you somehow are a member of a oppressed group. So I looked into this. The first of all, I wanted to find out if that man Oded Leifshitz had in fact been a righteous Jew, right? Somebody who was trying to help the Gazans rather than hurt them, as so many others in Israel are doing, right? Killing Gazans, oppressing them, hurting them, voting for people like Netanyahu, or even potentially even worse. So I wanted to find out, and full disclosure, what is the truth? Is Lifshitz somebody that we should consider to have been an innocent, right? Somebody, or better than innocent, somebody who was actually against the occupation, who wanted a free Palestine. And it does appear that, this is actually to say this is that there was, from the article about the attack in Florida, saying, there's been an uprising in both anti-Jewish and anti-Muslim incidents. But that's not, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I was more interested actually in this fellow, Oded Lifshitz, and I looked him up because, this is important. Who was killed? Who was hurt? Whose remains did Hamas actually turn over as part of the ceasefire hostage exchange? And it turns out that Mr. Lifshitz, in fact, was. And it's really horrible. It's so sad that this man was indeed a truly righteous Jew who was trying, in his way to help Gazans. And his family was really very seriously harmed, obviously. I mean, he's dead. The mom survived. And she was released on October 23rd. They were, their house was set on fire, although their daughter survived and was not taken hostage. But the parents in their 80s needed a lot of help. And Hamas did release the mom on the 23rd of 2023, October 23, 2023. So you wonder, why didn't they release the dad? And probably the answer is because he was dead, because he had been killed not by Hamas, but by an Israeli attack. Israel dropping these bombs that sucked up all the oxygen in these tunnels and suffocated everyone in them. And so it's very possible, that's, by the way, what Hamas said, that the victims had been killed by Israel. The victims of that, that were turned over, the remains, that they were actually killed by Israel. And it's very plausible. Nobody knows the truth. Israel says that the body of Shiri Bibas was not part of the remains, that she, in fact, had not been turned over, that it was somebody else that they can't identify. And that may be true, but we don't know. Who knows if it's true? That's what the IDF says, the Israeli military forensic investigators say. But they are also, as we know from many reports, looking for any possible pretext to start the killing again. And they'll use the deaths that they caused, very likely they caused. Remember, Hamas says they were killed in Israeli strikes during the Gaza war. No one has any evidence to say otherwise, that this wasn't Hamas. So Israel may well be lying when they claim that one of the bodies, the remains, isn't of the mom, Bibas. And they very likely did kill as well in their attack. I'm not saying they did it deliberately, but they knew when they were dropping those bunker buster bombs that they were very possibly hitting areas where there were hostages, and those hostages would be killed. And it's certainly not unreasonable to assume Israel did it deliberately, saying, well, hey, if there are, deliberately with the knowledge that there could be hostages killed, and the justification is, hey, if they're killed, then we can use it as propaganda. We can use it as hasbara. Because I wouldn't put anything past these people. They're the ones who use children as human shields. They're the ones who take old men and put them out in minefields. They're the ones who use children's heads and chests for target practice. That's who Israel is. So I don't have any reason, at this point to disbelieve Hamas. Doesn't mean that what they're saying is true, but certainly doesn't mean it isn't. But the idea that Israel is somehow the innocent victim here is ridiculous. Michael Tracy, who I tend to like, really misses the boat here on X. I was very surprised to see this, and I was very disappointed as well. So Michael Tracy, in responding to the remains being turned over, sorry, but the bending over backwards to rationalize the abduction of a baby who was subsequently killed is a good example of why elements of the pro-Palestine cohort definitely have their own big epistemic closure problem. So let's get into that a little bit. You want to call it rationalization. This is what I say to those of you who, and I think it's awful. Look, it was a terrible crime what happened on October 7. And certainly you hate to see innocent people targeted. You hate to see children, babies abducted. It is awful. I mean, of course. This is what happens when you oppress and persecute people and you keep them in a concentration camp and you give them no hope. There's going to be a reaction, and innocent people will be hurt and killed. That's what happens, and it is terrible. But the goal needs to be, let's not let this happen again. And let's understand the various forces that led to this. Now, I like the way he uses the past tense there, or it's not past, it is past, who was subsequently, but a passive voice to rationalize the abduction of a baby who was subsequently killed by Israel, most likely. And they could have saved those hostages. They could have negotiated. Those of you would say, well, then you just are going to kick the can down the road, right? I mean, if you negotiate with them today, then tomorrow they'll kill some more people and they'll take some more hostages because they're getting something out of it. And my answer to that is liberate Palestine, liberate Gaza. Treat them like human beings. Give them self-determination. Israel has the power, and it's using it to crush people. And is it any surprise that they're angry and they're taking it out and they're responding violently? That's exactly what you expect. Now, I don't know how this is a big epistemic. I think epistemology, isn't it, the study of words and language, I believe? So I don't know how we have a closure problem. I don't rationalize. This is what happens when you oppress people. That end of story. And I wrote, what are you talking about? The Israeli occupation is what led to the atrocity. If you want peace, fight for justice for all. And then someone else writes, yes, even in Nazi Germany, Germans saved Jews. Not a single Gazan saved a single hostage. Well, actually, that's not true. That's just flat out false. Hamas did not kill all the hostages. Many they did save. They tried to, protect, at least in terms of giving food too. And some were released earlier and they were healthy enough. But Israel was starving the entire area, choking it off. But there's another huge problem with that tweet. It conflates the Gazans with the Nazis, right? Even in Nazi Germany, Germans, the oppressor group, the group in power, the Germans, saved Jews. Not a single Gazan saved a single hostage. The Gazans are the Jews of today. The Gazans are the persecuted ones. The Gazans are the ones being killed. So you've got it completely backwards. You're saying the Gazans were supposed to save the hostages, save the Jews. But that would be equivalent to the Jews in Nazi Germany trying to save Germans. Now, I understand you could say, well, the hostages were in control of Hamas, and it's true. So there was a small little area where Hamas had some power, and they did use it to keep the hostages from being killed to a very significant degree. So that's just a false and misstatement, and it's a complete misreading of where we are now. 240-242-5646. The big fear we have to have is that the Israelis will now use, and Trump and the bloodthirsty element in his administration, in the Stefaниcs, the Huckabees, will use this to leverage the Rubios, to leverage a resumption of the genocide. That's my great fear. That's my great fear. All right, 240-242-5646. So the question I ask at the beginning is anti-Semitism a thing? And I do think there are people who dislike, I mean, I've seen it, right? But what are the implications? How are Jews being victimized as a result? If you don't like the fact that there are some people who may look at you askance because you're Jewish, then all I can say is fight for justice every day of your life. You can't change it. If you're someone who's like, so, oh my God, because I'm different in one way, there are people who don't like me. That's human nature. Look at yourself. Are there people you don't like because they're different? Are there people you say to yourself, what's the matter with those people? That's what we do as humans. We categorize, we judge. Now, I understand there are some saints out there who don't do this, but they're very few and far between. And those of you who say, well, I'm a liberal, I'm more open-minded. Really? Do you judge blue-collar people who voted Republican differently? Do you look at them as somehow other, as lesser? Because I'll bet some of you do. So the fact of the matter is, as human beings, this is what we do. We tend to judge and rate and categorize and rank people for all sorts of invidious ways. So how do you get around that? Well, you acknowledge it. You say, okay, I'm going to try to not do that. But the other thing you do is you say, well, I can't help it. I have feelings. These are my feelings. I try to understand them. I'll try not to act on them. But we make sure that as a collective, you don't get some advantage because you're in one particular group. You don't get to live that much better than somebody else. You don't get to go to the head of the line, or you're not pushed to the back of the line because you're a member of that group. That's how you address it. You say the tangible things we make sure are fairly and reasonably evenly distributed. That's the answer. And I never see anyone talk about this. I don't. That's what we do here at Halitics that others just don't do. And I can't stand that. I find it so incredibly, unbelievably annoying and frustrating because I want to see a groundswell, an upsurge, a recognition that what really, really, really matters is that we all have enough to live a decent life. And no one has too much to lord it over others, the way Israel can lord it over the Palestinians right now. All right, so from that article, I want to get to the Florida hate crime. Let's get into this because is anti-Semitism on the upsurge? And I've discussed this before. Florida Hate Crimes Unit probes shooting of Israelis thought to be Palestinian. So is this indicative of some upsurge in hate crimes? And I'm sure against Palestinians we're seeing that. But what about against people who are Jewish because they are Jewish? Is the same thing happening to them? It's very, very interesting that an article in Reuters from a couple days ago, 3 days ago, that talks about an attack that was based on, I don't can't really call it Islamophobic, right? Because they're not necessarily, they weren't necessarily attacked because they're Muslim. They were attacked because they're Palestinian. But an attack that was without question targeting Palestinians is nevertheless being used in this article to discuss an alleged rise in anti-Semitism, right? Rights advocates note a rise in anti-Muslim. I get that. Palestinians tend to be, not all of them, but many are Muslim. Anti-Palestinian. These were people who were targeted and shot because they were thought to be Palestinian. And then anti-Semitic. I'm not clear why that's part of this conversation. That attack was completely not anti-Semitic. In fact, it was by a Jew who wasn't self-hating. He wasn't a self-hating Jew, like a Bobby Fischer, the former chess champion who I think he was like half Jewish, something was full Jewish, who grew to, as he got older, he started seeing Jewish conspiracies and believing Jews were the root of all the evil in the world. So no, this wasn't some self-hating Jew. This was a Jewish man who was clearly psychotic and who decided he wanted to kill Palestinians. But as so often is the case, the attack, ultimately came back and bit the shooter. And we, and I've heard this, that Israel itself is I wonder if it's true. I can't say I'm shedding any tears, but that Israel's violent orgies against Muslims, against the Palestinians, against the Lebanese, into Syria, that in the end, this is actually making Israel not just less safe. I mean, certainly it's more hated. There are more people who want to kill Israelis and kill Jews too, as a matter of fact. But that in the end, this is weakening Israel. And maybe there's truth to that. I've heard there are people moving. I don't know. I haven't done a lot of investigation, but there's immigrants leaving the country because they don't like what it's become and they're afraid for their own lives. Maybe that's true. Maybe in the end, that will be some form of rough justice for Israel. Who knows? But in any event, this article, in response to an attack based on hate against Palestinians, and it's interesting that they're the ones hated when they're the ones who are the victims, right? Why? But this is so human nature, right? Like Americans for centuries oppressed Black people. And we enslaved them. I didn't personally, but Americans enslaved, white Americans, and some Black Americans actually enslaved African Americans, enslaved Black people. And then once they were liberated, once there was a war and, there was emancipation, then, after 10 years or so, there's the end of Reconstruction, and there's Jim Crow, and there's lynching, and there's terrible, terrible treatment of Black people. And yet, despite all that, despite the fact that there's no question that there was white oppression of Black people in this country, at the same time, there's tremendous hatred directed at Black people. So it's the same thing here. Israelis, most Jewish Israelis, right? They're mostly almost all Jewish. It's a Jewish state after all, are persecuting, oppressing, killing Palestinians. And now, instead of the Jewish people looking at themselves, the Israelis looking at themselves saying, what we're doing is wrong. We have to stop. This must end now. Instead, they're demeaning, degrading, attacking, insulting, dehumanizing the very people that they're mistreating. So we are seeing anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian hate, no question. But are we seeing also a rise in anti-Semitism? And according to the Reuters, that's happening. And they give some examples. So I wanted to go through the examples because they give examples of, I guess, anti-Palestinian actions, right? where you could say where Palestinians are targeted, they're attacked. And so this certainly, I mean, and this is what I always ask, if you're going to say there's a certain group is being targeted, that they're being attacked, where's the beef? Where's the evidence? So according to the Reuters feed from this article, they are very, very specific. And this sure looks like hate to me. Attempted drowning of a 3-year-old Palestinian American. Somebody tried to kill her, a 3-year-old. The fatal stabbing of a 6-year-old Palestinian American boy. Another stabbing. The beating of a Muslim man. A violent mob attack. And the shooting of 3 Palestinian American students in Vermont. Boy, those really sound bad, right? And there's plenty more, but I mean, this is what Reuters describes. So those are really ugly examples of hate. So now, remember, this article says, hey, there's anti-Palestine, there's anti-Muslim, and there's anti-Semitic. So we just went through some examples of clearly motivated of attacks of violence motivated by animus towards Palestinians. Little children. One was attempted to be drowned. One was fatally stabbed. Other stabbings, violent mob attacks, shooting, beating. That's what people in this country have been doing to Palestinians. Now let's look at the examples from this article to bolster the claim that there's anti-Semitism, the examples of the Jew hatred, a threat. So this isn't a stabbing or a drowning or a shooting or a violent mob attack. It's a threat of violence that resulted in a conviction and sentencing. There was an unsuccessful plot. Unlike the stabbing of the 6-year-old boy that resulted in his death, this is an unsuccessful plot. There were physical assaults, so that sounds bad, right? Against a Jewish man in Michigan, a rabbi in Maryland, and 2 Jewish students in Chicago. So we'll examine those in a moment. I don't want to be too glib. I don't want to be too blithe. There are certainly examples of real anti-Semitism. There was a synagogue in Pittsburgh that was shot up and people were killed. It was horrible. It was clearly motivated by anti-Semitism. This was before October 7, though. So these are supposed to be what's happened since October 7, showing an upsurge. I note also that the source for the allegation that there is this upsurge in violence is the Anti-Defamation League, which is clearly not credible. It's been rejected. It simply does not distinguish between attacks that are based on religious affiliation and attacks based on support for Israel, overt support for Israel. Now, you may say people shouldn't be attacked because they support Israel. That's fine, but that doesn't make it anti-Semitic. So the Michigan attack that we just heard, right? Because there was an unsuccessful plot, there was a threat that never materialized. What about this? This was the attack in Michigan. A 19-year-old male victim reported. So he reported he was walking when a group of unknown males asked him if he was Jewish. When he said, "Yes, I am," the males proceeded to assault him. Police said the suspects fled the area on foot and the victim suffered minor injuries and was not hospitalized. All right, that sounds bad, but it's anecdotal. We don't have any, hospital records, nothing. Just somebody says, I was attacked. Now, is it true? I probably, possibly. So, all right, we'll accept that. That's one example. I don't find it, I don't like it. It's not good. I'm not going to give it, put it in the same category as a 6-year-old boy stabbed to death or a 3-year-old girl being drowned, attempted to be drowned. So here's another attack. This was, what did they talk about? There was There was an attack in Michigan. What was the other? This is, a rabbi in Maryland. So this is in my county, Montgomery County, Maryland. For unknown reasons, right? This is supposedly another anti-Semitic attack. For unknown reasons, the male suspect swung a wooden stake at the victim, striking him. Montgomery County Police said in a statement. The incident is being investigated as a hate crime. Okay, investigate it. But it says right in the quote from the police, we don't know why he did it. It's unknown. So is that proof or even evidence of hate against Jews? There could be a million reasons. I understand he was a rabbi. Did the male suspect, Junior Michael Reese, know that this man who was attacked was a rabbi? Was he wearing rabbi garb? I mean, maybe, but this article doesn't tell you that. This is supposed to be the proof of all the anti-Semitism. And these are supposed to be the strong cases where there's really not a lot of doubt. Well, there sure seems to be a hell of a lot of doubt. Okay, in Chicago, more examples supposedly of the proof of all this this rampant hatred against my people. Chicago, November 9, 2024, just a few months ago. It was a horrendous crime. 2 Jewish students attacked at DePaul, which is a Catholic school, interesting, after being targeted. So that sure seems pretty clear anti-Semitism, right? They were attacked after being targeted. And they say it was because we're Jewish. One of the 2 victims, Kaminsky, it was a horrendous crime, a horrendous assault. It was clear it was because we were Jewish. Was it because you were Jewish, Kaminsky? Or is it because you were showing your Israeli pride, your pride in a genocidal country? And we were holding up a sign encouraging people to come up and talk to us about the IDF, about Israel. So that's anti-Semitism? Really? You weren't saying, we want to tell you about our synagogue. We want to talk about keeping the Shabbat. No, you were talking specifically about how you're proud of your affiliation with a genocidal country. You wanted to talk about the military that's carrying out the cold-blooded ethnic cleansing in Gaza. How is this an evidence of anything related to anti-Semitism? It's not. And this is what Reuters says shows a surge in anti-Semitism. So except for an anecdotal story, these are supposed to be the strongest cases, right? We know there's all this anti-Semitism because Reuters is cataloging the crimes since October 7 against Jews because they're Jewish. So what do we have? We have 2 Jewish people who were shot, 2 Israelis who were killed, not killed, they were shot, they were thought to be killed, they were not killed. 2 Israelis who were shot at in Miami Beach because they were thought to be Palestinian. I don't call that anti-Semitism. You have an anecdotal story of a Michigan young man who says he was asked if he was Jewish and then he was attacked. 1, not hospitalized, no medical records. You have a rabbi who was attacked for unknown reasons. And you have a couple of young men who were showing their Israeli pride and flying a flag of genocide. Wow. We Jews are so persecuted. I don't think I can go out of my house without fear of being attacked. It's extraordinary. I mean, this is, it's mind-boggling that people could claim to be victims. So horrible. Because because that attitude, right? And this is human nature. Trust, it's not just Jewish people. Everybody wants to see themselves. I remember when I was a kid, and we had some neighbors who were Catholic, and they started telling me about how when the Christian religion was first gaining a foothold after Christ in the Roman Empire, how Christians were thrown to the lions, and it was so hard to be a Christian. Well, I'm sure it may well have been in 75 AD, but I don't know how relevant that is to 20th century America. Don't tell me about how you're the victim. I mean, it because of what happened to your co-religionists, nearly 2,000 years ago. It would have been 2,000, 1,900 years earlier. Really? Come on, man. Come on. I think we do so much better as people when we fight for others, when we fight for people besides ourselves. If we are privileged, if we have a comfortable existence, if we recognize others as deserving of fair treatment, as deserving of comfort, of a little bit of ease, of some humane treatment, I think we do better as people when we do that. This is one of the reasons why I'm not a big believer in the whole idea of, I understand people are targeted because they're members of groups, but I think what we need to do is treat everybody as an individual, and individual circumstances determine our response to a situation, not membership in a particular group. Yes, Jews have been treated terribly over the years. Yes, we have been subject to terrible victimization and prejudice, but that doesn't mean that it's happening right now. If you need a place to live, you get a home. If you need health care, you get it. If you don't have a job, we're going to make sure there's work available that you can do. That's what a decent, caring society does. It doesn't look at you and say, okay, because of the color of your skin, or because you're wearing a particular item of religious garb, you're entitled to special treatment, or you're entitled, or you should be looked at as as different, as wrong, as misguided. That's not how we should be doing it. All right. There's a lot of talk about this blue sky. This is sort of like the alternative to Musk's Twitter, X, whatever. And I get it. Musk is a bad guy. He's clearly looking to try to, he's the richest person in the world, and he's using his wealth and influence to get even richer, right? This is what people do. And I just went through this whole spiel about how we should be trying to help others, not aggrandize ourselves or view ourselves as some kind of a victim. So I understand the blue sky thing, right? But let's not pretend that somehow this blue sky is some kind of a wonderful, democratic, pro-worker nirvana. I just opened my feed the other day. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I have like no friends. I don't follow anybody. They don't follow me. I don't follow Richard Branson. I don't follow Mark Cuban. I was just like, wow, the first two in my feed are these two billionaires. This is blue sky. So Richard Branson from Virgin Airlines is telling me how great Volodymyr Zelensky is, one of the great leaders of our time. Well, I think there's things to admire about Zelensky. I'm not going to say there aren't, but hey, is this just your way of trying to bolster and promote endless war with Russia? Because that's my take on it. My take is you don't really care, Richard Branson, about the people of Ukraine. You're just trying to say, hey, let's stick it to Trump and keep killing Russians, right? Let's keep the battlefield red with blood of Ukrainians and Russians. Isn't that what you're really trying to do here, Branson? And then Mark Cuban, another billionaire, This is your see, guys. We are in the middle. We're in the crosshairs of a battle royale between the billionaire class, among the billionaire class, to determine who gets to exploit everybody else the worst. This isn't about building a better society. That would mean we don't have billionaires. That would mean when you get above a certain level of income or wealth, it's almost all taxed away from you. So everyone has enough and no one has too much. Blue sky, blue like the Democrats. This is who the Democrats are. They're captured. They're owned by the Richard Bransons and the Mark Cubans. And you can even see this. Look at Cuban's post. Thank you to Rachel Maddow. Wow. I mean, come on. Rachel Maddow, who's done so much harm. Now, this is somebody who could have really done some influence for good from her perch at MSNBC, right? She could have said, hey, to the Democrats, you got to be on the side of working people. You have to promote Medicare for all. You have to promote good jobs. And instead, she spends day after day promoting a completely bogus hoax, the Russiagate hoax. And she triples down on it. And this is, obviously because she's getting tens of millions of dollars to do it. She actually did have to take a pay cut, right, from 30 million to 25 million. So that's who Mark Cuban extols. Please don't believe that these billionaires or somehow your billionaires are on your side. They're not. Just like Pritzker, J.B. Pritzker, the billionaire scion of the Hyatt hotel family and a private equity guy. He's not on our side. He's not on the working people's side. He's not on the side of poor, struggling and middle class Americans any more than Musk or Trump or any of them are. Well, maybe a little more, but not much more. Okay, so let's see, at 12:45. I like these guys. I'll go to this story, and I'll even show you what my little note is. So it's discredited environmentalism. These are the. I'm going to see. By the way, I mentioned this. I will get to see Chris Hedges. I presume I'll get to talk to him a little bit this weekend at the Worker Strike Back convention. I'm leaving for Seattle this afternoon. I'm actually looking forward to going. It should be fun, although it's going to be for a very short time. And my wife had said maybe I should have stayed a little bit longer because I'm just going to turn around and come back Sunday night. But actually, I'm glad, to be coming home too. But I wrote discredited environmentalism because that's what the due dissidence bros claim they're doing, that they're presenting an example of bourgeois environmentalism and how it hurts the progressive movement. And there's something to that, but it's really kind of a load of crap. But let's play it for you.
Example of how the liberal class has discredited a lot of noble left causes like environmentalism. I think, the Yellow Vest movement in France signaled that. I can tell you as a delivery driver, I know.
So I think the Yellow Vest movement, I was thinking about that. I didn't really do a lot of research, but what Keaton Weiss, I think is his name, is saying there is that with regard to France, there was going to be, I guess, higher taxes on gasoline. And a lot of working people reacted against that. And they were wearing the yellow vests, and truck drivers were saying this is going to take a big chunk out of our living and we can't afford it. And what Keaton Weiss is saying is that example discredits the environmental movement, but it doesn't in any way. Obviously, we have to move away from consumption of gasoline for so many reasons. I mean, first and foremost, the climate cataclysm, the cliff that we're already falling over. It's not that environmentalism was discredited. They were right to say we need to raise the price of gasoline. The problem is that wealth and income in France is increasingly, just like in this country, although not nearly to the same degree, wealth and income is increasingly unfairly distributed with the few, they have billionaires in France now. I don't think they used to. They absolutely do. With political and business elites gobbling up more and more and more of the French gross domestic product. So given that fact, truck drivers, car driver, people who drive a car for a living, they're going to be really upset if they have to pay higher prices for gasoline. The way you deal with that is you don't say this discredits the environmental movement. What you say to that is, we got to make sure that the pain isn't felt by poor, struggling, and working French people. It's felt by the billionaire class. It's felt by the multimillionaires, so that we greatly reduce wealth and income inequality. If you drive a truck, you're going to have really good health care. You're still going to have a retirement, because that was part of the yellow vest, was that Macron wanted to raise the retirement age, right, to 66 or 65 or something of that nature. So that was another issue. The austerity program, we're going to make sure when we're living in a time of scarcity, there aren't as many, there's not, as much resource. The resources are being used up, and we can't burn as much gasoline, and even if we have it in coal as we used to, because it's destroying our future. So we have to make do with less in certain ways. France is more and more overcrowded, right? 65 million people or something in France. There just isn't as much room. There's not as much space. The size of France is the same size as Texas. There are twice as many people there. So we all will have to, total consumption has to level out and ultimately drop in France, but we're going to make sure that the people who pay the price are the billionaire class. That said, no, we don't get to burn gasoline the way we used to. No, we don't get to burn coal. We don't get to burn natural gas. That's the right answer, not, this discredits the movement with regard to the yellow vest.
Facetious. Paper bags are a total pain in the ass. Paper bags, the transition from plastic to paper bags costs workers money. Seriously. So
his complaint now is that when we had, we see this in a lot of places, no more plastic bags at the supermarket. What we do in Maryland is there's a charge. You want a plastic bag, you have to pay extra for it. And it's greatly reduced the consumption of those plastic bags. It's wonderful. We just have cloth bags that we bring to the supermarket. This has had a very, very salutary effect. I remember you used to walk around and you'd see plastic bags everywhere, cluttering up woodlands. They were hideous. And beyond that, they were very dangerous to wildlife. If they get in the river, fish could choke in them, turtles, aquatic life in the oceans. Now, this is the fact that we're moving away to a significant degree from those plastic bags has hardly solved the environmental crisis that humans have created. But it's a small step in the right direction. But Keaton Weiss doesn't like it because he was a delivery driver and it cut back on his income. And I get it. I don't mean to be too dismissive. But my God, it's so self-centered. It's so selfish. Even though, and I also am more certainly compassionate, more empathic, because those folks, the DoorDash drivers and the like, they're not making very much money. They're barely making it. So every little expense adds up. Let me play a little more from him.
Takes a lot more time to deliver groceries from the car to the door when you got these paper bags with no handles on them. It costs workers, when I was driving Instacart and DoorDash, it would cost me at least $10, $15 a day, which is $50 a week, which is $2,500 a year. That's not chump change. And so I think when workers see these regulations put on their backs, and then they see people lecturing them about climate change from, meetings like, Davos, where they fly to on private jets. I think that's a perfect example of how the liberal class has just discredited a very noble left cause, which is environmentalism. So what do we do as a left organizing?
Right, so I'll just stop that. I mean, he gets so much of that wrong. The liberals, the people like Greta Thunberg, who go to Davos, they're the ones who are taking on the billionaire elites. It's the billionaire elites who are responsible for destroying our planet. They're not the ones who are lecturing about environmentalism at all. They're the ones being lectured to. And rather than criticize those Davos elites for allegedly trying some sort of top-down response to the climate catastrophe, Keaton White should be attacking them for all the fossil fuels that they consume. But I get his point. In the end, he's saying, and I think it's fair, he's saying, hey, at least in this example, saying no more plastic bags does hurt delivery people. So, okay. So the answer isn't we don't regulate plastic bags. The answer isn't we stop preventing plastic bags from getting into rivers and woodlands and, this permanent, because the plastic is basically permanent, never degrades. The answer isn't that we don't stop using plastic bags. The answer is we make sure that DoorDash drivers have health care, that DoorDash drivers get paid a living wage, period, that you're not paid by the delivery, that you're paid, whatever a minimum fair living wage is. And if it turns out that that's not a particularly efficient or smart way to have groceries delivered, I mean, I think it makes so much more sense. We live close to markets and we walk to markets. We don't have somebody drive hither and yon with the groceries in their car. But if they do, then hopefully we have cleaner, greener vehicles. But if that's the model that we're going to use is delivery, well, your wages aren't dependent on how many plastic bags you can carry from your car to a home in short order. So that's where Keaton White should be pushing. He should be saying, hey, in the environmental community, we need to, and by the way, I do this, we need to be very, very cognizant of whose ox is being gored when we promote particular solutions. People always accuse me, oh, you don't really care. You can afford to pay higher taxes on gasoline, Hal, and you have a electric vehicle. Well, that's all true. And you know what I say to that? That's why I always say the money collected by that tax needs to be returned to the American people. And if you want to do it based on, to a significant degree, income, in other words, poorer people get a higher share, a bigger share of that revenue from the tax, I'm good with that. Let's do it. But we've got to recognize that we have to disincentivize the consumption of fossil fuels because they're destroying our planet. And this is where, Weiss just won't go. He refuses to go. All right, we've got a few more minutes. 240-242-5646. I was hoping to get a call or more. But let me just get to, I want to, yeah, because I've got a couple of good stories here. The New York Times just so doesn't get it. Let me just do this. This is Ezra Klein. And I used to sort of like Ezra Klein. I thought he was kind of an interesting guy. This was like 20 years ago when he started at the Washington Post. And he was sort of their tech person. And he was kind of a think differently, not the old paleo cons or the old liberal class from the 1960s. He was kind of like, let's use technology to improve people's lives. And I was like, okay, I'm good with that. But he's really just proven to be just more wine, same wine in a new bottle, basically. And he's incredibly rich. He started Vox Media, right? So this is a guy who, along with Matthew Iglesias, is incredibly rich. Things have gone really well for him. I always wonder about that. How can you even think things are going well for you? I don't care how rich you are. You're living on a dying planet. How could things be good? But yet, for so many of these people, I saw this about Nate Silver too, they seem so unaware. They seem to lack cognizance of just how bad things are. And I'm not talking about, oh, Trump's awful, Trump's Satan, Trump's this, Trump. No, the planet is dying. Your planet. Look at you. You can see Klein's picture. He's probably 40, 35 years. Maybe he's, what did I say, 20 years? He's probably in his mid to late 40s, I'm going to guess. He looks good in that picture, though, bottom left there. There seems to be a complete disconnect. These so-called public intellectuals' failure to understand and acknowledge the depth of the crisis that humans have created. Now, maybe partly it is, hey, well, yeah, there's going to be a lot of death. Billions may die. There are going to be cities underwater. But hey, I'm so rich. I have so much that I'll certainly be okay. And maybe that's the ultimate mindset. I just don't know. But Klein's like a Democrat who is thinking differently. So this is his whole thing is Democrats lost. Let's think differently. And he explains what he's trying to do here. He's going to talk to congressional Democrats, which is kind of interesting because aren't they the ones who are to blame by supporting people like Hakeem Jeffries to be their leader, by failing to move truly progressive legislation, bills that will make life better for the American people? Aren't they to blame for the election of Trump and the fact that the Democrat Party apparently now fewer people? I saw this Jamarl, I believe is the man's name, talking about how we now have fewer people who call themselves Democrats in America than Republicans. That's an incredible statistic if that's true. So here's Klein. I started asking congressional Dems, what is your priority? And so this is a good question that he asked them that. Yeah, and they don't have one, right? There's no priority. The Democrat Party doesn't have a priority. And as I've been saying, I think this is why this article, I thought he was going to ask them, well, we'll get to where this article goes completely off the rails. But Klein has a good question. And this is what I said to Jamie Raskin. What's your vision? Kind of the same as priority. Where do you see America? How are you going to make things better? What's the Democratic vision? And they don't have one. So what a shock that they lose elections. So yeah, fight against the worst that Trump's doing, which by the way, what is the worst that Trump's doing? Some seem to think it's peace in Russia, with Russia. I mean, that's like the best thing he's doing. That's the worst thing? Peace with Russia? I think rounding people up who've been living in this country sometimes for decades, putting them in concentration camps. That's pretty bad. That's a hell of a lot worse than peace with Russia. But it means fighting the worst, okay, and also providing an alternative. So yeah, well, what's that alternative? Worker-centric bills, legislation. And so this is where we see Ezra Klein completely going off the rails. So what he's going to try to do on his podcast is talk to Democrats who are trying to find that alternative, crafting an agenda that is alive to this moment. Not, and this is the importance why I highlighted, not just one carried over from the past. In other words, we don't need no stinking Bernie Sanders, Medicare for all. We don't need to talk about free trade and how it's destroyed communities across our nation. No, we need a new agenda that's totally different from that FDR, passed that LBJ, Great Society, that New Deal. No, that's old. That's old news. We can't go back. Let's move forward. I mean, after all, I'm worth a few $100 million. I don't want 90% top marginal tax rates like, FDR imposed. I'm not for that. Come on. So one Democrat who's interested me is Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts. He's talking about the abundance agenda. Now, forgive me for having zero idea what the abundance agenda is, but to be fair to Klein, he does define the abundance agenda, or Auchincloss. Well, no, I guess it's Klein. And you know what? That abundance agenda sounds suspiciously similar to something else. I thought there were going to be new ideas. We're not going back to the past. So the abundance agenda makes the case that if you're trying to lower the cost of living for the typical American family, you need to unlock supply rather than subsidize demand. You know what that sounds suspiciously like? Supply side economics, right? That's the Republican Reagan, whose policies did so much damage to our country. That's when we first started running up those big budget deficits because of massive tax cuts for the billionaire class, which really didn't exist until those tax cuts were put in place. That was an enormous. Reagan really started the ball rolling or pushed it towards more and more neoliberalism, towards, quote, free, unquote, trade. So it strikes me as kind of odd that the Democrat with the new ideas, Auchincloss, is actually promoting a discredited idea from 40 plus years ago that came from the Republicans. It's kind of weird, isn't it? You'd think Ezra Klein, liberal. Hey, that didn't really work. The supply side economics, which will give the suppliers, right? The job creators, the rentiers, the people who own the factories. We just need them to make more things, more stuff. Let's give them more tax breaks. But he agrees with it, right? I agree. We need more supply, not let's just make sure everyone has enough for their basic needs and a little more, and then they have leisure time. No. We need more stuff. It's so absurd. The idea that you go into any supermarket, there's stuff everywhere. It's not like, there's eggs, right? We have a few items. But it's not, the problem isn't that there's not enough supply. There's more than enough food for all of us. It's that it's wildly unequally distributed, the resources and the money to purchase those items. It's the housing. We need more homes. We need more houses built. Well, I don't totally disagree with that. But again, people need the resources to be able to purchase or rent a house. There are units. Now, maybe we could get more inexpensive units. I get it. But this is where, again, the focus, it isn't on making sure everyone has enough, on guaranteeing enough resources to each person. No, we need zoning reform to expand supply. In other words, we just need to be building everywhere, right? Those wetlands, they're not going to be zoned to be protected. No. You can just pour a bunch of concrete over that little swampy area over there and build some condos right on top of it. We need off-site construction. So he's saying modular units, right? Because it costs too much to build on-site. There may be truth to that. I don't know. I'm not an expert. And I certainly think these are areas where we need to explore. But ultimately what Klein is calling for is deregulation. And he completely ignores the reason we have regulations. And well, he doesn't ignore it. He dismisses the reasons. So he talks about some lower, housing for low working class housing and affordable housing in San Francisco, a project that apparently called Tehama Houses that was apparently pretty, efficiently built. Didn't cost that much. But there was a lot of complaints because it was modular and there were fewer on-site jobs. So I'm down with this. You want to explore building off-site, bringing the units, as long as they're American jobs, right? And I looked very much into this Tehanan. What did I say? Tehanan. They apparently built the units in another town in California. They had a factory. They had an assembly plant, and so they were able to assemble the different rooms and different modules, and then assemble them on site. So that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying that's not a good idea. It may well have been. But then he goes on to say, well, the problem is it's too expensive now. You want a lot of good union jobs. You want high environmental standards. You want affordable housing. Well, we can't have all of this. We can't have everything bagel liberalism. Well, why not? What kind of the point you make is these are our goals. We're going to make sure that people who work have decent pay. We are going to make sure that we don't befoul our environment. And we're going to make sure that people can afford these homes. It seems that he's saying, well, wait, we can't have all those things, so let's make up our minds. Well, as long as you've got a few $100 million, Klein, maybe we can't. Maybe what we look first at is wealth and income redistribution then. And if it turns out we're still at a point where we can't build these relatively, pleasant homes, that we can't all afford them, then we have to, as a society, collectively reduce our expectations. Maybe we don't all get our own bedroom, right? Maybe kids have to double or triple up. Maybe but not just the poor, not just the working class. When we're all in the same boat, we're all going to be willing to accept a reduction in consumption. But when a few people like you, Klein, are living it up, and then you're saying to everyone else, well, don't expect that good union job. Don't expect clean air and water. Because we got to make sure you have a place to sleep. Well, that's not going to fly. All of those are critically important to a decent civilized society. And as a leader, as somebody who's at the top of the tree, you, Klein, should be talking about belt tightening for yourself and your class. But you don't, and it's not in the New York Times, and you don't promote that. You promote the same old wine in a new bottle. It's now called, what was it called? Abundance economy, not supply side, but it is supply side. It's the exact same thing. We give more to the billionaires. We unfetter them. We unshackle them. And everything will turn out okay. Except you tried it and tried it and tried it again, and everything keeps getting worse. All right. That will do it for me. That will do it for the free-for-all. I am not confident I will be live Monday, but there's always a chance, and I will post when I have an idea what will be happening this Monday. Otherwise, if I don't see you Monday, we have Arlen Tuesday, and that will be a really good show. Looking forward to it.